Now we're going to use the very same principle of ground subtraction that we used to make one color appear to be two different colors, and this time we're going to make two different colors appear to be the same color. So again, stressing the fact that color is relative. It's a medium that is constantly changing, depends on lots of variables, depends on the lighting situation, depends on the medium you're using, and in this exercise we're demonstrating how it depends on the background colors. So colors interact with one another at all times. They are constantly changing depending on their environment. So you have to be aware of that and understand how to manipulate that. Ground subtraction is one of the largest operating principles of color relativity. So we have an example here on the right hand side of how we've taken a slightly more warm yellow color in comparison to a slightly more greenish, yellowish green color, and place them on different backgrounds to make them appear to be the same color. I can take this color here and drag it over to show you that they are indeed different colors. However, when I then place that color back in the center and you give your eyes a moment to adjust, you can see how the two colors are appearing to be the same color simply because of the way the background is affecting the foreground color. So what's going on here is that this more warm brownish orange background is subtracting out its hue properties from the foreground color to push that color into the more yellow range. And this green background here is subtracting out its green qualities from this yellow-green color to make it look more yellow. So it's important to note that this can only be done with colors that share some properties. They have to have something in common for you to be able to shift them into the same area of spectrum or area on the color wheel. So it's important to choose colors that are adjacent to one another for this effect to occur. Obviously you can't really make complementary colors appear to be the same color because they don't share any similar hue properties. They're completely opposite of one another. So I'm going to show you how we're going to do this with an example of a warmish reddish magenta color here versus a cool purpley violet color on the right hand side. First thing you want to do is you really want to examine the different properties of these colors to see exactly how they're different from one another. So we can see if we look at the color wheel laid out in linear fashion on the hue slider here at the top, that one color is slightly closer to red and the other color is slightly closer to blue. We can also look at the saturation and note that the color on the left is less saturated and the color on the right is more saturated. Also, the color on the left is lighter and the color on the right is darker. So we're going to be manipulating all three of those properties of hue, value, and saturation to make these two different colors appear to be the same color. So first we'll start with the background for the magenta color. Now this is somewhat of a trial and error process. You never can be 100% certain that you're getting it perfectly the first time, so you do have to do a little bit of trial and error where you choose a color, check it to see if it's working, tweak it if you need to, and just play around with it. But you want to use those principles of ground subtraction. So first, we know that this is the color that we have on the left, and we want to push it down on this color wheel. I've selected the H radial button so we can see the color wheel laid out in linear fashion here. We want to get it to go down more towards the blue-violet colors, right? So we want the background to be warmer so that we are subtracting out the warm properties, right, using that principle of ground subtraction. Now this color also happens to be more muted than the other color, so what we want to do is we want to make it look more saturated. And how do you make something look more saturated? Well, you put it onto a background that is more muted. So I'm going to bring down the saturation. And then in terms of the value, this color also happens to be the lighter of the two colors, so we need to make it look darker. So to make a color look darker, we need to put it onto a lighter background. So that's how I'm arriving at my background color for the left-hand color. And again, it's just kind of an educated guess. It's probably won't be perfect the first time. So then we go to the second color here, and double click on your color picker to open it up, and we're going to select the background color for the violet color. Now in this case we need to get this color to move up in hue, push it more towards the magenta end of things. So we're going to take the background down this way to subtract out those blue properties of the color. And in terms of the saturation, this color is more saturated than the other color, so we need to make it look more muted. So that means we're going to put it onto a more saturated background. Okay, so we're going to bump up the saturation. And then in terms of the brightness, or the value rather, this color is darker, so we need to make it look lighter. So we're going to put it onto a darker background. So I just darkened it a little bit. Then we hit OK, and then we put that color into our background and see how it's working, see if we're getting the effect that we need. And for kind of a first run of this, it's actually not bad. We did a pretty good job of pushing these two very different colors towards being the same color. So if you kind of squint your eyes and look at those two colors, if you were to show someone just this part of the shapes with the colors on the backgrounds, at first glance they would probably think that the center color was the same color, because they do appear to be much more similar than they do when they're placed adjacent to one another in this color pair at the top. So that's how you use the principles of ground subtraction, manipulating the properties of hue, value, and saturation to use color relativity to your advantage when working with color.